Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for something a little bit different today. Rather than being about Path of Exile, this is about an upcoming game that I'm reasonably excited by. So, Ashes of Creation caught my attention after this video posted by Youtuber The Lazy Peon, which caught my attention. It sort of went a little bit viral. It's one of his more successful videos, and he has quite a bit of reach as it is. He went through the reasons he's excited for the game, and I had to say that after watching this video, I was quite interested in it as well. So I highly recommend having a look at that. It goes into more detail in systems than I'm able to do so here, but I thought I'd put out my opinion on it. So firstly, I did a little bit of a poll where I asked subscribers what they think about the upcoming MMO Ashes of Creation. Now, I deliberately put a joke answer first. That's just because if you misclick the poll booth, the poll box, you tend to vote for the first option. And so I wanted to put a joke answer in there that people that didn't feel passionately about it would vote for anyway, and additionally that would get rid of any bias that would come up as a result of misclicks favouring the first option. And so, of the roughly 400 people that voted, there was a moderate amount of complete disinterest, which doesn't surprise me. Then a fair number of people that are excited, and a smaller number that like the sound of it but have low expectations. And then there were a few comments that were quite interesting as well. So you got me to Google it, but PvP escort quests is my idea of MMO hell, and those caravans sound important. Was one of the more negative ones, which I think is entirely reasonable. This game is not going to be for everyone, but it certainly was exciting me. And actually, a lot of the reasons that Mara here was interested in it, was not interested in it, are some of the reasons that I'm going to be interested in it. So, what about this channel? Firstly, I have no intentions of changing this channel to be about Ashes of Creation. I expect it to remain Path of Exile focused in the foreseeable future, but the game did catch my eye. So, early in the MMO genre, there were two main design philosophies. The sandbox and the theme park. The theme park design focuses on providing a number of what you might term rides, fun, self-contained experiences like multiplayer dungeons that are found in World of Warcraft. These are pretty easy to get into, and generally these MMOs are the best ones to play if you have short play sessions. So essentially, you can log on at 7 o'clock, by 5 past 7 you're in a group, and by 20 past 7 you've finished a dungeon. Then, at 20 past 7, you make a decision. Oh, yep, I'll go and I'll do another dungeon. Or, no, you know what? That's all for tonight. Really works well for people that are in that sort of short, regularly interrupted play sessions environment. Sandboxes, on the other hand, allow players to make meaningful but fleeting structures and connections. However, you have to somewhat make your own fun within the game. So where World of Warcraft is probably 95% theme park, and EVE Online at the other end, in terms of successful games, EVE Online is probably the furthest to the other end of the spectrum, maybe 95% sandbox. Ashes looks to strike a little bit of a balance that's more at the sandbox end. I'm going to call it 80% sandbox, 20% theme park. Now, of course, this is just based on their design philosophy and the Lazy Peon video, so it may well be that the actual slider doesn't fit exactly at the 80% marker. Maybe it's more 70%, maybe it's more 50-50. We'll find that out. But this is interesting because the only real competition in the whole genre of sandbox MMOs is EVE Online, which is a very dated game now. Now, I don't think that this game is a World of Warcraft killer, as many people sort of talk up every new MMO in development as being, but it might be an EVE Online killer. So firstly, I want to talk about the things that will make this game not for certain people. So one of the key things that a lot of people don't like in MMOs, and that's going to be a big focus in Ashes of Creation, is meaningful PvP in which other players can inflict genuine setbacks upon you. So that's something that, if you played EVE Online, even leaving aside the horror stories of someone that loads up everything that they can into Eidolon, undocks it, and then immediately gets exploded by a ganker who then turns around and steals half the life savings, and the other half of the life savings end up getting destroyed. That's the extreme case in EVE Online. But The other thing that can happen in EVE Online is that you and a bunch of your trusted corporation mates, so guilds are called corporations in that game, so you and a bunch of guildmates can build together a station in a citadel in the stars that's your own. It's yours. You're using it as a base of operations in dangerous space, and then suddenly in comes an overwhelming fleet and destroys it. So ultimately, you can suffer meaningful setbacks in PvP in EVE Online, and that's going to be the case in Ashes of Creation as well. The second thing that may be a deal breaker for some people is that it will be based on a monthly subscription fee. And unlike EVE Online, there will not be a grey market in... well, not a grey market, it's a completely endorsed market. There will not be a market in game time. So in EVE Online, you can purchase units of game time and then trade them to other players in game. So essentially, this is a game design facilitated RMT transaction of a sort. It's just that you can't withdraw money; you can only get game time from it. In fact, my account on EVE Online, I probably have something like 1 trillion ISK worth of assets in it. So if I was to trade that to other players and sell all my assets, including my characters, I'd be looking at having enough in-game currency to buy maybe 40 or 50 years of game time for one account. And that's going to be something that's not an option in Ashes of Creation. And I'm far from one of the richest players in EVE as well. The third thing that might be a deal breaker for some people is that there will be serious social integration requirements. I don't think that this game is going to be particularly playable without a guild. So that doesn't mean that you can't sort of explore it a little bit and try to meet people. That will be playable, but I think you'll hit a brick wall at which content will be locked, at which access to meaningful content will be gated behind having a group of other players around you. I don't know how far into the game that brick wall will be. I sort of get a feeling it might be quite some way in. So you might have, say, 100 hours of engaging gameplay that you can do solo, but then if you want to go much further than that, you're going to need to find other players. And so I think it's going to be the sort of game that will require you to have a microphone, for instance, and to be engaged in voice chat. In terms of comparisons to EVE Online, because I do think it's the most similar game in existence at the moment, I think EVE Online shows there is a very real niche for a competitive sandbox game. So this is a game in which players' actions can shape the game world. That's the sandbox element of it, but also a competitive game in which there's a cutthroat and ruthless edge to dealings between players. EVE Online has absolutely awful player versus environment content. Like if you've ever found, how would you put this? Like, imagine that there's no monsters more exciting than Hillock in the game. In EVE Online, pretty much every monster can be broken down to, oh yeah, this is how well. This is a few stats about the monster. There is what statuses it can inflict on you, so it can inflict maybe warp scrambling, which prevents you from fleeing, or status webification, which lowers your speed, various other status effects that they can inflict on you. Then it deals a certain amount of damage, and it has a certain level of agility. And essentially, a lot of encounters just come down to, are my stats high enough? Okay, in that case, I can pretty close to go AFK and do this. I just need to keep changing my target every now and again. However, the PvP is incredible, and the reason for this is that your opponents are unpredictable. There's a reason that a very simple game like chess can be exciting when you're playing it against a human opponent. You can't just learn their AI and exploit holes in it the way that you can when doing PvE in an MMO. You need to react constantly, both to the good decisions that your opponent makes, especially if they're a skilled player, but also to the bad decisions that they might make, and to just unpredictable strategies that they may have come up with. You see, your opponents aren't just waiting for you to come and take their loot. They're actually executing counter strategies of their own. Sometimes they'll be brilliant, sometimes they'll be foolish, sometimes they will have an excellent strategy and make a terrible mistake that you can exploit. These are the things that make PvP in EVE so exciting despite the actual underlying combat being really no more interesting than the combat in chess. So most of the thrill of PvE in EVE centers around the prospect of another player just popping in and saying hello. Maybe they'll attack you, maybe they're just goading you. And this tension in a lot of ways can be like the tension you experience when you're watching a horror movie. Was that anomaly, that strange behaviour, was that a sign? Or was it just a coincidence? And oh my god, what is this thing and why is it now eating my face? The fun part of the horror movie is actually the anticipation. It's not the part where someone's face is being eaten. It's the period leading up to that happening, where there's that level of tension. And that is what PvE in EVE Online does really well. And I think that Ashes can do that, and possibly, at my most optimistic, I'm thinking, may even be able to do it better. The other thing with EVE is that it's often nicknamed Everyone versus Everyone, or Sociopaths in Space. And that's because it's a game in which the fun is interacting with, sometimes fighting other players. Some of them will stab you in the front, those are the ones you call your enemies. Some will stab you in the back, those are the ones you call your friends. And some of them will remain loyal as well. Now, EVE has conflicts that have become legendary. Sometimes the actions of one individual can shape the entire future of the game world. Possibly one of the biggest wars the game has ever seen, Band of Brothers versus Goons, around about 2009. And this was the thing that brought EVE Online to my attention. I hadn't played it, and I read about this on various gaming sites. This was decided by a single leader of Band of Brothers switching loyalties in the middle of the war, and before they were detected, they carried out a massive act of sabotage against their former side. This swung the entire war. So the side that was losing the war ended up winning it because of the actions of that one player. And that's just something that you don't see in, say for instance, World of Warcraft, theme park MMO. You're not having a raid and then one player does something exceptional. You're losing the monster, Ragnaros or whatever the bosses are now. Ragnaros is towering over your raid group. 6 of you are down, you've got no healers left, and then suddenly this one player pulls out some miraculous strategy and turns the whole battle around. That doesn't happen. Instead, it requires all of the players to decide the result. Instead, in EVE, there's that potential for things to be exceptional. Again, I think this is something that Ashes of Creation might have an element of, although it is hard to say so far. Now, in my opinion, unfortunately, EVE Online has gone to a level of pay to cheat that I can't really recommend it anymore. What Ashes does, at least from my reading of things, is that it dissects the part of EVE Online that work well, while discarding many other systems. So fundamentally, in EVE, there's a tension between players who want to be left alone and players who want to actively engage other players. And say if you're a miner in EVE, mining being one of the most basic forms of player versus environment play, you might want to avoid PvP yourself, but you want your other rivals, other miners, to suffer major losses in PvP. Because if that happens, they're less able to compete with you on the market for minerals in the game. In Ashes, this dynamic seems to be less important and a bit different, because the most important steps of creating new civilizations appear to involve a good deal of PvP, sort of time where you are exposed to PvP automatically. But this is mostly about creating new civilizations or leveling up a civilization, rather than just advancing your own character. So essentially, if you want to make your guild stronger, then you're going to need to engage in PvP elements with your guild. But if you want to make your own character stronger, then PvP is an option. I think this will be a really interesting dynamic overall. So the thing that has really captured my attention with this game is the node system. So as a group in Ashes of Creation, you can establish a settlement. Now, as anyone that's played a civilization game knows, settlements have exclusion zones around them, where you can't have other settlements. And the bigger that your settlement gets, the larger this exclusion zone becomes. What this means is that there's a tension. If you've got a city in one spot, and someone else has got a town somewhere else, you might have had no trouble advancing to the point of being a city, and for them to advance to the point of being a town. But if they want to advance past the stage of being a town and into the stage of being a city, then they're unable to do so because you've already claimed that land. and therefore they need to fight you in order to gain access to the requisite land. Likewise, if you want to advance your city into a metropolis, you're going to need to go and deal with this out of control weed that's growing on your doorstep. Now, you can create these settlements, and then you can decide to dedicate them to militarism, to science, to religion, or to commerce. And so this is going to create a lot of tension, as players will have a genuine incentive to disperse other settlements to maximize their own growth, which will require massive quests that culminate in massive PvP battles. But the lead up to those massive quests is going to involve minor skirmishes. But where in EVE Online, you can win through sheer force of numbers. If your opponent can field 50 defenders, then you can bring 800 and slaughter them. This doesn't seem to be the case in Ashes of Creation, where it looks like the biggest battles will be capped at 250 a side. So for instance, if your settlement is near a volcanic caldera, and your settlement is focused upon militarism, this might unlock access to a raid against a red dragon. Now, I'm just making this up because I haven't actually played the game. I'm just going by the system's information that's been available. May well not be that there is a red dragon raid. Alternately, if you are commerce-based instead, your settlement might unlock something else entirely. So someone with a different vision for what to do with this volcanic caldera might decide that, okay, we need to deal with these people that are farming this red dragon raid every time it resets. We need to drive them out because we want a religion-based, we want to have a temple of the fire gods there, and that might unlock some new access to content. So there's going to be divergent visions as to how to best use an area of the game, and that's going to be something that players are going to be able to fight over in-game. As I say, it'll be a conflict driver, and it's something where individual players don't seem to suffer massive setbacks the way that they can in EVE Online. However, guilds can suffer massive ones. I think this is a better balance than EVE Strikes, and I think it's something that that is going to be something that Ashes looks like it's doing really well. So losing sieges, which is where someone attacks your city with the intent to destroy it, is going to be a serious setback for a guild, but it's not a game over moment. Where in EVE, winning a war decisively requires actually sapping your opponent's will to log in Ashes, your opponents will have their characters will remain powerful, and so they will be able to go and establish a new settlement somewhere else. Maybe then they'll have a grudge against you. Maybe they'll come back and try and deal with you again later, after a little bit of time licking their wounds. So I think this will be a better dynamic, or alternately, maybe they'll find somewhere better. So I think that the process of losing wars will be less destructive than it is in EVE, but the rewards for winning them will still remain high. Another thing that this game looks like it's going to do better than EVE Online: sieges will be at a set time based upon your server. So if you play on an Australian server, then you'll need to be your guild will need to be able to field military force at a certain time that's in Australian peak hour. This is miles better than EVE Online's system of time zone tanking, where if you don't want to engage in PvP, what you can do is set your structures so that the time that they're vulnerable is during Australian peak time. And most opponents don't have the ability to project force at Australian peak time, because they're made up of people who are playing in the United States or in Europe, and Australian peak is a terrible time for those people. And as a result, they're not going to be able to actually attack you again. So I think having this server-wide siege time is a brilliant idea, and actually having this sort of segregated worlds where players that want to play you pick your time zone and you can play during off-peak times, but the most important stuff on the server happens during peak hour. I think this is going to be a fantastic thing, and I'm surprised no one's done it yet. It does have one real drawback though, and that is that if the game is less successful than I'm hoping it might be, then off time zones may not have enough players to support a full server. That is a problem if that happens, and I guess the game will have to deal with that if and when it does occur. The other thing that's really interesting is that building up a settlement appears to require caravan runs. And caravan runs, where are our caravan runs? These look really fascinating. This is something where players can basically commit to escorting a caravan of goods from one location of interest to another. And during this period, while you are around a caravan, you create a static PvP zone around that caravan. So anyone that wants to maraud can attack your caravan. This could be opportunistic people going, oh look, these people look like they've got some money. Or it could be rivals that actively want to sabotage your whatever major project your guild is constructing. Now, this is one of those mechanics that, as I said, people are often quite militantly disinterested in, and that's fine. Like putting it as an escort quest that with PvP sounds like my idea of MMO hell, but actually, I think these will be a lot of fun. What they're going to be is essentially a guild group activity that's going to be mostly calm. You're just going to be walking along, you'll see a low-level player and you'll be like, oh, yep, hi, how's it going? Or if you're feeling like an arsehole, you'll be like, oh, look, a low-level player. Pull out a bow and arrow and go, ding! But mostly they'll just be calm and you'll be sitting around socializing with your mates in-game. However, sometimes a rival guild will attack. And then it's time to either immediately defend your caravan or even to flee, regroup, and counterattack, depending upon the situation. And again, if this is done even halfway well, this is going to capture that sense of tension that I was talking about earlier in Eve, where you think things are pretty calm and relaxed, but very quickly there's that explosion of, that cascade of things happening all at once. Bang, 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 and suddenly you're in for a massive fight. And even when that tension doesn't actually reach a high point, doesn't actually reach a climax, like it often doesn't in a horror movie. Often there'll be a scene where you're thinking, oh, there's going to be a jump scare, and then there isn't a jump scare because they've designed the movie a bit better than to rely on jump scares. They can still be really memorable scenes. So yeah, I'm really keen to see this in practice. The other thing that I'm keen about Ashes of Creation for is the stance that it's had so far on pay-to-cheat elements. I hate the term pay-to-win. You're not paying to win. You're a loser. You're paying to cheat. That's all there is to it. So, like Path of Exile, Ashes of Creation is being made by a gamer with a little bit of money behind him. However, unlike Chris Wilson at the founding of Grinding Your Games, the CEO of Intrepid Studios has a lot of money behind him. He's very independently wealthy. And he's gone on record saying that he basically hates pay-to-cheat features as much as I do, that they're a plague in the gaming world, and he's not going to allow them. I'm optimistic this will be adhered to, especially given that the game has no external investors. So there's no various profit-chasing studios that are looking to get a short-term return. Instead, there's the person whose overall vision is creating the game is ultimately obviously looking for a long-term return, but it doesn't need to be a short-term return. It's not all about getting the maximum possible results in this quarter. And as a result, I think you might see something similar to Path of Exile, where there's a long period with absolutely no pay-to-cheat in the game. And, this is actually realistic. But, of course, I'm not making a promise that this will be correct. This is my belief about the game, but I'm not sure that it's going to be the case. So, in conclusion, I'm somewhat excited by this game. It's been a long time since I've been hyped pre-launch for a game. The last time I was hyped pre-launch for a game was probably Diablo 3, and that didn't work out all that well. But anyway, so yeah, look, it looks like it could be good. I'm making no promises that it will be, but I'm excited and I'm keeping an eye on this. If the schedule works in conjunction with Path of Exile 2's release, I'm keen to take a serious look into the game, and I am curious to know whether people would be interested in Ashes of Creation content beyond, just why I'm excited by the game video, and into actual things like character build discussion or tips and tricks and things like that. So I don't know yet. I'm not intending to change this channel in that way, but if you've got opinions, definitely let me know. Anyways, do check out the Lazy Peons video if you're interested in learning more about the ins and outs of the game. There's a whole lot of little sections about things like goes into the node system a little bit more than I do. Then there's things like the election of mayors of nodes. Then there's stuff on the corruption system, which is a question of how it's handled if you are trying to keep to yourself in the game and other players impose PvP on you. What recourse do you have, and what's going to happen to the attackers? This one's quite interesting in that it's set up in such a way that if you've got a serious grudge against someone, you can go and mess with them a couple of times without serious consequences. But if you keep doing it, you're going to have real consequences for doing so. So it looks quite interesting. There's a whole lot more. Like I haven't been able to discuss everything. There's stuff on player housing, which doesn't really excite me, but hey, lots of people will like it. And also some stuff on the fast travel philosophy. This is a game in which the developers don't intend fast travel to be a thing. They intend it to be a long, to be moving from one end of the map to another will take time. And something that EVE Online discovered was that allowing players to project force rapidly over the entire map causes serious gameplay issues. So EVE Online a couple of years ago had a situation where basically if you were involved in a war, if you had a skirmish pretty much anywhere on the map, there were two major power blocks that could bring overwhelming force within 90 minutes to 2 hours. And this caused a lot of stagnation in the game meta. They actually imposed massive nerfs on the ability of players to fast travel. As a result of this, things like the Titan Bridge nerfs and Capital Jump Ship nerfs and jump fatigue being the main mechanic they introduced to do that. And that was something that addressed that issue of force projection. Ashes of Creation looks to be keenly aware of issues with force projection across the entire map, and they don't want a situation where there's one or two mega powers that can just basically go to the other side of the map and then crush someone without that being seriously disruptive to the mega power. So that's something that they're aware of, but that is of course going to result in some, like the things that they use to constrain the ability of mega powers to travel quickly around the map. Those are also going to result in there being some inconvenience for ordinary players. So anyway, that's the last thought that I've got. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.